Alright, here we are with our functions learning target 1.2. So this time we're finding the input or the output, given the other one, given a graph. Okay, so similar to the table, we're given one and we find the other one. The difference now is in telling what we do. Okay, so when we think about a graph here, okay, that horizontal movement is the x. Okay, that's our input movement. So if I have anything f of a number with the number inside, so 5 or f of 7 or f of negative 2, okay, those are all numbers 5 or 7 or negative 2 that are on the x-axis, okay? And so what we look for on that is essentially we're making kind of an invisible line here at 5, and we want to know where our graph goes at that point. So we want to know right here what that point is that's going to match with our 5, and then we're going to find it what its y value is, what if it's f of x, which is the vertical, right? So in that case, it would be an input of 5 gives us an output of 5, okay? And that point would be 5, 5. So what we're looking for is the input gives us what output according to our graph, okay? No matter what the graph looks like. Okay, the other way we do it is if we're given the output first, where if we give f of x equals, we'll say negative 2, okay? So then I would draw that line on my horizontal, well, the vertical axis, the y-axis, but I would draw it horizontally and see again, where does it hit on my line, and where is that going to go, okay? Where would that match up in the x? And we'll say this is negative 5, okay? So x would equal negative 5 in this instance. So this point would be negative 5, negative 2, okay? Again, that input to that output, okay? Alright, so let's take a look on here, because this one can seem kind of confusing. Alright, so let's start off with let's do the first two, well, maybe I know what we'll do. Okay, let's start with 1 and take a look at this one. If you can, try to do this first without looking at the answers. But if you need a few examples and then try to do the rest, you can do it that way too. So, f of 2, we've got the input of 2. So I go on the x-axis where 2 is. Then I look to where my graph crosses. And if I look at this, my graph is crossing right at that point, isn't it? Okay, so I don't need to move up or down to find where my graph crosses. That line, right? It's like I make that invisible line here and see where it's crossing. So then what's my x going to be? Or my y going to be? Well, at that point, what's the y value? Well, the y value would be here at 0. Okay, so f of 2 would equal 0 because that point is 2, 0. Input of 2, output of 0. Okay? So again, f of 4. So I go to 4, okay, right there. And again, I'm drawing like an invisible line and seeing where that graph crosses that invisible line. And I see it crosses right there. Okay, well, what's the y value of that point? It's 4. So it would be 4 right there. Because that point would be 4, 4. Input of 4, output of 4. Alright. Now f of x equals negative 4. Okay. Now we're given the output. The output is the y-axis, so I go down to negative 4 on the y-axis. And what do we see there? That my line crosses right at that point. Okay. I've made that horizontal invisible line, and my graph crosses right there on the y-axis, which means if I go up, my x value is going to be 0. So x equals 0 because this point is 0, negative 4. Output of negative 4, input of 0. Alright, and that last one, f of x equals 2. Go up to positive 2. Draw that invisible line if I have to. Where does it cross my line that I'm looking at? Right there. What's the x? The x is 3. So x has to equal 3. Okay. Now, looking at number 3, what if it's kind of not a straight line? We treat it the same. Okay, so f of 2 means I go down here to 2. And notice, just like that other one, it hits it right there. So my y value is going to be 0. Now what about f of negative 1? So negative 1's right here. So we draw that vertical line. Where does it cross? Crosses right here. What's the y of that? It's negative 3, because that point would be negative 1, negative 3. Input of negative 1, output of negative 3. Okay, going backwards, f of x equals negative 4. So negative 4 again hits it right on that y-axis, so going up here, my x value would be 0. Looking at f of x equals 5, 5 is up here. If I draw an invisible line, I should notice that on this graph, it crosses twice. And that's okay, because one input gives me one output. Okay? And I go down, my x is 3, or my x is negative 3. Okay? And that's what it looks like. Alright? Alright, let's take another example of, let's look at number 9 for our next example. Then if you haven't yet, you should pause it and try all these on your own. Okay, g of 1. So 1 is my x right here. Go up and find my graph. Draw that invisible line if you need to that point right there. What's the y value? The y value is 6, because that point is 1, 6. Input of 1, output of 6. Okay, g of 3. Here's 3. Draw that invisible line. Where does it cross? Crosses at that point, which has a y value of 24, because that point is 3, 24. Okay, now c and d, right, we're doing it backwards. G of x equals 12, so 12 is right here on my y. Draw that horizontal line. See, it hits right here, which if I drop that down to my x, that has an x value of 2, because 2, 12 is that point. Output of 12, input of 2. And finally, g of x equals 3. 3 is right there on the y-axis, so my x value has to be 0. Alright? Okay, so try those out. 10, 11, and 12, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, and 2. Okay, so pause it and try that out if you haven't already. However, I think I am going to start from the back, and we'll move kind of weird. So, g of negative 1, there's negative 1, go up to that point. That point is in between 4 and 2, so it's going to be a y value of 3. G of negative 2 right here jumps up in between 10 and 8, so a y value of 9. Okay, starting with a g of x equals 27, y value of 27, go to that point, drop it down, x has to be negative 3. G of x equals 1, which would be that point right there. So dropping it down on that, the x value would be 0. Alright, number 11, g of 2. 2's right here. Draw that line. Crosses right at that point, which has a y value of 16. G of negative 2. X value of negative 2 goes up to that line, which crosses at a y value of 1. Because that point is negative 2, 1. Okay, opposite way, g of x equals 4. 4 is right on the y-axis, and that is right where our line goes. So its x value, because we're going backwards, drops down and has an x value of 0. G of x equals 8. 8's right here. We draw that horizontal line if we have to. Intercepts right here. Drop it down. X equals 1. Okay, number 10, g of negative 1, go up, right there, it hits a y value of 1. G of 3 is right here, jump it up to our graph, crosses right there at 16. G of x equals 8 being right here, crosses right there, drop it down, that equals 2. And g of x equals 2, it's right there on it's the y-intercept, so x has to equal 0 on that one. Okay, there's all our exponential ones. Okay, now finish the linear. So let's do 8. F of negative 1, so negative 1 would be right here, so then you travel up the graph, see that it's at 5, so y value of 5. F of 1 is right there, travel it up, it's a positive 1 for y. F of x equals negative 3, negative 3 is down here, go horizontal, that point right there, which we pull it up to a x equals 3. F of x equals 3 would be right there, that y-intercept, so x is going to equal 0. Okay, we'll come back to number 7 in a second. Looking at number 2, f of 2, right on the money, so we know that's 0. F of 4, okay, oh, made a mistake, f of 4, which would be right here. We start with the x, drop it down, and it's negative 4. Okay, if f of x equals 0, okay, 0 would be right here. Where's our graph hit? It's over there at positive 2, right on the x-axis. If f equals 2, right here, take it over, x equals 1. Alright, number 4, f of negative 4 would be right here, drop it down, hits at negative 2. F of 0 would be right there, drop it down, and a y value of negative 1. If f of x equals 0, we start at 0 for y, take it to the right, and x would equal 4. And then if f of x is negative 2, we've done that one, we follow the path back to negative 4. Okay, remember we're just finding the other coordinate that point is on the line. Okay, number 5. We've got f of 5. 5 is right here. We take it up to our graph. Its y value is 5. F of negative 3, back here, take it down. Its y value is also negative 3. F of x equals negative 4 right here. Take it over, then up to our x of negative 4. F of x equals 2. Take it over, then drop it down to where x equals 2. Okay, pretty easy one on that. Now, if we look at 6 and 7, we've got a horizontal and a vertical line. The thing to remember is on a horizontal, every y value on every single point on here is going to be 2, right? So, it doesn't matter what x value I pick as I go up, they're all going to come back to 2. So if f of negative 5 goes up, hits it at 2. F of 1 goes up, hits it at 2. Okay. What about if f of x is 2? Okay. Well, what are the possible x's? Well, we've got all these points here, dropping them down. Basically, okay, you could say all numbers, infinity, all reals. Okay. But what about c? F of x equals 3. Well, 3 is up here. Is there any way to connect to my graph here? There isn't, so there's no solution in that x. And that's what you do with horizontal. So vertical is going to be very similar, just backwards, okay, where x's always had the same y value, and y values, only one of them would work. It's going to be flip-flopped. So if I have f of x equals negative 3, my y value of negative 3 would be right here, y value of 5 right here. But what are all those points going to do? They're going to hit x at negative 3. Okay? Then, if I have f of negative 3, well, that's that line right there, right? So all of these y values would work. So all reals, all the numbers. Which means if f equals 2 over here, it's again going to be no solution. Okay? Alright, so the graph one can be pretty tricky, but hopefully that helped you, that extra practice and just kind of seeing some more examples. Hopefully helped you to understand how you go about. Just make sure that you pay attention to, if you're given the input like this, or if you're given the output like this. Okay? Alright, there we go.